The number 5 landing spot for tight end this year, the Los Angeles Chargers. So with Kellen Moore coming over, I fully expected Dalton Schultz to be a Charger this year. Obviously, he didn't. He went to the Houston Texans. That was a little surprising. They do still have Gerald Everett on the roster, Trey McKitty, Dalton Parham. They still have these guys. They can walk away from Gerald Everett. Not that I think they do. I think it's $4 million to pay him to stay and then $4 million in savings if they wanted to cut him. But either way, I think there's some opportunity there with a quarterback like Justin Herbert. Again, Kellen Moore coming in. You know how much he likes to throw the ball. They got a quality offensive line. So especially in a dynasty format, I think the Chargers are a fantastic landing spot for a tight end. Moving on to number 4. The number 4 landing spot, the Las Vegas Raiders, with Foster Moreau leaving. Unfortunately, he it looks like he has cancer. They caught it in the medical screening with the Saints. So thank goodness they found it, and hopefully he recovers and gets back at it. I want him to be a Bengal. What do you think of the surroundings, by the way? The new and improved. I didn't even touch on that. But either way, Foster Moreau's off the team, unfortunately. Hopefully he gets back to being fully healthy and playing football. They traded away Darren Waller, so that leaves a massive hole at tight end. They do have Austin Hooper, who came in, and then O.J. Howard as well is on the roster. But those guys I'm not really concerned about. Chig Okonkwo beat out Austin Hooper last year, 4th-round tight end. Again, it's those types of opportunities that we're looking for. So to beat out Austin Hooper and O.J. Howard, I'm really not concerned with that. I think this is a quality landing spot with the offensive coordinator and the offensive coach. Obviously, Josh McDaniels there. Jimmy Garoppolo comes in. You got a relatively quality quarterback. There's lots of mouths to feed. Hunter Renfrow, Jacoby Myers comes in, and obviously Devontae Adams. But, you're not looking for a crazy amount here, 400 or 500 yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns, something like that. If you get that out of a 4th-round tight end, I think you're printing money at that point. So that's the number 4 landing spot for tight end. Let's move over to the number 3 landing spot. We got the Green Bay Packers. So it's a little bit of a kind of hot mess in Green Bay right now. I do think that a trade ultimately does get done. I just think that the Jets are a little too invested at this point, that they have to get Aaron Rodgers. It'd be pretty tough to explain that away to your fan base when, it's been on the burner for months now. I think it does ultimately get done. And then Jordan Love's going to be the quarterback here in Green Bay. But beyond that, even at the wide receiver position, there's not a lot of competition here for targets. I think there's plenty of target share open for a tight end, especially if they get a skilled one. A lot of mock drafts have, a guy like Dalton Kincaid going here, potentially Michael Mayer. Honestly, I don't know if I see any tight end going in the 1st round, just because there is so much depth. With tight end and running back, there's a ton of depth in this year's draft. So I think that you just wait, unless you really love Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer. I don't think anyone could fall in love with Michael Mayer enough to take him in the 1st round. That's for sure. That's just my opinion. Maybe Dalton Kincaid, but I'm not taking him in the 1st round, especially halfway through the 1st round like the Packers are. If they do want to trade down and get him, I guess, but I don't particularly see that happening. But 3rd, 4th, 5th round, if they get a tight end that's quality, and in this year's draft, I think that's perfectly reasonable to expect. I think that's a good landing spot. And again, there's not a crazy amount of mouths to feed in Green Bay here. You got Christian Watson, who's still unproven, and his ADP is a little out of control, if you ask me. But Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, really not much here that you have to compete with. Josiah DeGuara at the tight end spot, really not concerned. Aaron Jones is a quality running back. A.J. Dillon's a quality running back. But until they start, running the ball like they should with those 2 running backs, I'm just going to think they're going to keep throwing the ball. So not a lot of mouths to feed. I think there's definitely some room for a tight end to come in here and really excel, especially if he's skilled. It's going to come down to how Jordan Love is as a quarterback. This offensive line needs some work, but they can definitely address that in the draft. And I think that's what they do in the 1st round. They're going to have to look for a bookend tackle, I think, with Bakhtiari eventually probably going to be hanging him up maybe after this year, especially with Aaron Rodgers gone. We'll see how that works out. So the O-line can use some work, but they have a lot of, swing guys and guys that can move around that line that they can just if they draft a guy this year, which again I think they do in this year's draft, in the first round, I think they draft a tackle, and then you can just put the best 5 guys out there. And with DeGuara being a quality blocker, again, I think if there's there's an opening here for a quality tight end, Luke Musgrave, a guy like that, maybe I think could fit in well with this team, and again, really, really excel and potentially be the number 1 target on this team. Again, Christian Watson's still unproven, like it or not, he is. So that's the number 3 spot for tight end. I think that's a team we need to keep an eye on in this year's draft if they do end up picking a tight end in the 4th, 5th round. Let's move on to the number 2 spot. We got the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, Mike Gesicki leaves. He goes up to a division rival with the New England Patriots, which I think is a fantastic landing spot for him. Basically, your competition is Durham Smythe. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't make me nervous whatsoever. So again, not going to happen in the first round because the Dolphins don't have a first round pick, but I don't see any tight end going in the first round. I'm certainly not taking one, even though all the signs behind me here, and we'll see who's at number 1, but I'm not taking a tight end in the first round personally. But again, no competition at the tight end position. There's Tyreek Hill, obviously, and Jalen Waddle are the 2 main targets on this team. They're always going to be while they're on the team. That's not going to change. But there is room for a 3rd target, and it doesn't look like, unless they draft a guy at wide receiver, right? I'm not really concerned about Cedric Wilson. I don't think they love him there anyways. There's some other mouths to feed, but I'm really not concerned at the wide receiver spot on the Dolphins. They definitely could use a guy that is more George Kittle-like than Mike Gesicki. I just feel like that's the reason why Mike Gesicki didn't excel in this offense. Is Mike McDaniel likes a tight end that can block as well as get open, run routes, and ultimately catch the ball and get you fantasy points. And I don't think that Gesicki just fit the mold that he was looking for at that position. And again, Durham Smythe, Eric Saubert, I'm really not concerned. They traded away Hunter Long in the Jalen Ramsey deal. So there's an opening here for a pass catcher, and it doesn't have to come from the wide receiver position, because I don't particularly see them drafting one too high. They just picked up Don't Call Me Robbie, Chosen Anderson. Braxton Berrios comes over again from a division rival with the Jets. But other than that, Tyreek Hill, of course, Jalen Waddle, of course, but there's room for another 3. And I think that could definitely be at the tight end position, a lot like you see with the San Francisco 49ers with Debo, Ayuk, and George Kittle. So I think there's totally an opening here. Again, I'm not taking one in the first round. They don't even have a first round pick, but 3rd, 4th, 5th, even potentially the 6th round, depending on how deep it gets, because it is a super deep tight end class. So we'll see, but I think they need a guy like, maybe a guy that I like is Sam Laporta. I think Sam Laporta would fit in fantastic with this team. He can do a lot of the things, comes from the same school as George Kittle. So I think that's a good spot for him. Makes tons of sense to me. He can do all the similar things. He should be able to do all the things that Mike McDaniels wants out of that position. But we'll see where they kind of land, but this is definitely a spot that we need to keep an eye on. Again, the number 2 spot for a tight end. You're looking for value here. These types of positions, tight end, potentially some running backs later in the draft. If you're a 2nd, 3rd round pick, you're sitting there looking at a guy that's drafted, a tight end that's drafted by the Miami Dolphins. I'm picking him. I really don't care what his name is. I'll look at some measurables and stuff like that, but I'm going to take a shot on him, in the 3rd round of a 12-team fantasy draft. You better believe it. So number 2 spot, the Miami Dolphins. Number 1 spot, you see the team behind me. I think this makes tons of sense. I think there's a few spots, and we'll get into it throughout the duration of this show here. I think there's a few spots that you can really excel, and keep an eye on the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, the offensive line should be covered this year. Orlando Brown, and then Jonah Williams. To be honest, Jonah Williams is going to be forced to play the right side. And there's really nothing he can do about it. There's nothing anyone can do about it. Just play out your last year, your contract. This is the final year. No one's going to trade for you. It's just, play the last year of your contract on the right side, and earn yourself another contract in free agency, and then come back and stick it to the Bengals, do what you got to do. And they do still have Lael Collins there, Alex Kappa, Cordell Volson, Jackson Carbon. All of a sudden, the Cincinnati Bengal offensive line is in an extremely good spot, if you ask me. It's probably the best spot it's ever been since I've been a fan of this team, with obviously Orlando Brown coming in. So the wide receiver position is basically set. I don't think Jamar Chase has hit his ceiling yet. T. Higgins is right there. He certainly hasn't hit his ceiling yet either. And hopefully we can keep this team together. We'll see. Tyler Boyd, one of the better slot receivers in the league, super, super underrated in my opinion. He's there as well, but there's obviously room for, Hayden Hurst type numbers on this team. I'm not expecting any 1,000-yard tight end or anything like that. But again, 400 to 600 yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns. I think that's completely viable, with Joe Burrow as your quarterback. Brian Callahan's still there as the offensive coordinator. Everything's pretty much set on this team. It's a very, very quality team, very quality offense, and one of the best young quarterbacks in the game, if I do say so myself. So you got to beat out Irv Smith, who might finally get a chance to swerve. Let Irv swerve, right? Devin Aussie, Drew Sample, second-round pick a couple years ago. I'm really not concerned. We haven't seen enough out of Irv Smith for me to be concerned about a rookie being able to come in and beat him out for that job. I think it's going to be a relatively high priority in the draft of the Bengals. They never really trade up, at least certainly not in the first round. And I sincerely hope they don't draft a tight end in the first round this year. If they do, maybe Dalton Kincaid, because they have some blocking tight ends. And if it is, I'm even more excited. I'm unhappy as a Bengals fan because I don't want that to be the pick in the first round. A guy that I like potentially is a local kid, Josh Wiley, I think is a guy that the Bengals might look at. I think just a side note, regardless, I think Tyler Scott or Josh Wiley are going to be a Bengal, both local guys. So we'll see how that works out. But this is the number one spot to keep your eye on for tight ends. Any tight end that gets drafted to the Bengals, whether it's first, second, third, fourth, fifth round, I'm going to take a shot on, again, especially in a dynasty format. If Irv Smith ends up falling on his face and being nothing, similar to how it ended up in Minnesota, then there you go. And he's only on a 1-year deal anyways. So keep your eyes out. If a tight end goes to the Cincinnati Bengals, that's certainly somewhere that I'm looking, and I'll take a shot on.